Alright, hello everyone and welcome back to Star Wars Mark of Balance. My name is Mark, and today I want to give you guys my year in review for Star Wars in 2025. I'll be discussing all the biggest releases we got in the past year, as well as announcements and news updates on future projects. Tell you what I loved, what I didn't love, what I was disappointed by, what I was pleasantly surprised by, and really put the whole year in perspective. I've been doing these types of episodes for almost 5 years now, and I absolutely love pulling them together. Whether it was a good year or bad year for Star Wars, I think it's really cool to just create this time capsule or snapshot of what Star Wars looked like in each year that me and you can both revisit in the future and reminisce on the good times and the bad times. This was a very interesting year for Star Wars because for the first time ever, I think live-action TV shows were the projects that carried the year for Star Wars, and the animated releases were the ones that were disappointing to me. Andor Season 2 solidified itself as one of the best TV shows ever created, and the Skeleton Crew capped off a really surprising and really enjoyable season of television in Star Wars at the beginning of the year. Whereas Tales of the Underworld felt like a project that never justified its existence and was ultimately forgettable, Star Wars Visions Volume 3 was my least favorite volume of the series so far. Even though it had episodes like Dark and The Lost Ones, which I consider to be two amazing pieces of Star Wars animation, I felt the season overall felt extremely safe and unoriginal in a lot of its stories. As someone who always champions Star Wars animation as the strongest and most consistent form of Star Wars media, it was very disappointing to see an off year for animation because if these two projects hit, Tales of the Underworld and Star Wars Visions Volume 3, this would have been an incredible year for Star Wars releases across the board. Luckily, LEGO Star Wars Pieces of the Past, the second season of Rebuild the Galaxy, was there to pick up the slack for animated TV shows. 2025 was a huge year for Star Wars announcements across movies, video games, and TV shows. Now, I know what you're thinking. Mark, they've made these types of announcements before. Most of the projects get canceled or they get delayed indefinitely and they never see the light of day. And while I typically share your skepticism, this year felt different. We got not one, but two movie announcements with The Mandalorian and Grogu and Star Wars Starfighter, the biggest surprise for me from this year from Sean Levy, starring my king, Ryan Gosling. Both movies have wrapped filming and have set release dates over the next 2 years, which hasn't been the norm in the post-Rise of Skywalker world. We got 3 video game announcements this year with Star Wars Zero Company, Star Wars Galactic Racer, and Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic. 2 of those games are set to release next year, which, if there are no delays, 2026 will be the first year since 2011 that we get 2 major Star Wars video game releases. And while I have some concerns about Fate of the Old Republic because I don't think we're seeing that game for 3 to 4 years, it does feel like across the board, Disney and Lucasfilm are being more intentional with how they're announcing projects. I'm probably going to eat those words, but it does genuinely feel like there is a shift in the mindset around announcements of projects. It doesn't feel like we're just saying names and showing logos of things that don't even have a script yet. These projects were actively in development when they were announced. The creators are on board and fully focused on Star Wars. They're not working on other things, but they'll eventually get to Star Wars. We'll see how these projects actually turn out, but at least this is a step in the right direction when it comes to project announcements. Don't worry, I didn't forget about Maul Shadow Lord or the Ninth Jedi spin-off series announcements. Animation has always just had their shit together, and when they announce a project, the project comes out. Crazy concept, I know, but Lucasfilm Animation has somehow had that figured out for a very long time, and Disney is still trying to catch up. Speaking of projects that have never come to fruition, 2025 was another quiet year when it came to updates on the Rey movie, the James Mangold Dawn of the Jedi movie, and we added a couple more canceled projects to the list, namely The Hunt for Ben Solo, which took over the internet for a couple weeks. So even though it looks like Disney is taking a step in the right direction with their announcements, those old lingering projects are still haunting them, and I'll give some more detailed thoughts on this later in the episode. There were some notable book releases this year, namely The End of the High Republic Era, that I'll also be discussing in this episode. The thing that I'm most sad about in 2025 with Star Wars is that I missed the opportunity to see Revenge of the Sith in theaters again for its 20th anniversary. I forget exactly what was going on in my life at the time when this was in theaters, but for some reason, I could not make it to experience that film again on the big screen. I remember when I was 6, 7 years. Oh shit! I just said 6, 7. I remember when I was young, going to the theater, lifting my lightsaber when the opening crawl started, and I just really am upset that I could not have that feeling again of being in the theater, seeing Order 66, Battle of the Heroes, and hearing John Williams' masterpiece of a score in a huge auditorium. I'm really kicking myself, but I know that we'll probably get another anniversary release soon. Now, in previous years, how I've structured this episode is I would do a top 5 favorite moments of the year and a top 5 least favorite moments of the year. But starting last year, I've transitioned to just doing an overview of each of the projects that have released this year, my thoughts and opinions on them, and I keep it relatively brief. I'm not going to go into too much detail because that would be way too long. But without further ado, let's jump into the year of Star Wars in 2025. So let's start with the best thing that Star Wars released in 2025, maybe the best thing Star Wars has ever released, and that's Andor Season 2. Andor Season 2 delivered in all facets for the second and final season of the show. It delivered satisfying conclusions to all of our characters. It gave us twists and surprises, huge emotional moments, more incredible monologues. And this season solidified the show as one of the best pieces of TV that we've ever gotten. And I don't say that lightly, but the ambition, the IP it's attached to, and the execution cannot be understated. On top of that, it did take home the Emmy for Best Writing in a Drama Series, which is something that only the greatest shows of all time have won. Breaking Bad, Sopranos, The West Wing, Succession, and Mad Men are all previous winners, so Andor has joined elite company as a TV show. Now, I don't think Season 2 is a perfect season of television. I think there are some pacing issues at the beginning of the season. I do think some storylines fall short, like Cassian being stuck in a turf war between two rebel factions. But I do think once the season gets going and all the setup is complete, the final 2 arcs are incredible. The Gorman Massacre, Mon Mothma's speech, Luthen and Clea's backstory, the escape from Coruscant, all of that had me at the edge of my seat, had tears in my eyes, and gave me a Star Wars experience I haven't had in a very long time. Skeleton Crew did release most of its episodes in 2024, but the final few episodes did air in 2025, and I think they did a good job of wrapping up a very surprising season of Star Wars live-action TV, so I think it deserves a spot on this list in 2025 as well. I do have some issues with how everything gets resolved at the end of the season. There are a lot of conveniences. I think Jod becomes a bit of an idiot in the end. But ultimately, this was a really fun ride. This was aimed towards children, and I think it absolutely did a great job of appealing to that crowd while also making someone like me and probably people older than me have that feeling of nostalgia and kid-like wonder again in Star Wars. I think the cast of child actors did a great job. They really got to show their range with some surprisingly emotional scenes, as well as having consistently good comedic timing throughout the season. Jude Law obviously stole the show here. He was a fantastic addition to the Star Wars galaxy. And I think the early episodes of the season did a really great job of getting me invested in the mystery of Adden. It felt like it was a great treasure hunt, and we were learning things about the Star Wars galaxy that we hadn't seen before, so it did feel wholly original, which is something I'm always looking out for nowadays in Star Wars. So for me, Skeleton Crew Season 1 was a huge success. I would happily watch a Season 2 of this show. I would happily see this cast of characters in another Star Wars project in the future, especially Jude Law. So hoping to see more Skeleton Crew in the future. All right, now let's move to the more negative end of the spectrum with the animated projects released in 2025. Tales of the Underworld was another disappointing entry in the Tales series, a series that, aside from the Count Dooku episodes from Season 1, has really punched below its weight with the quality of stories that it's been telling. With the level of animation they now have, combined with the freedom of story structure that is available to them with this format, it's been extremely frustrating to see how much they limit themselves in the stories that they tell and the characters that they select. Tales of the Underworld was a prime example of selecting two characters that did not need to be explored further in Cad Bane and Asajj Ventress. I felt that giving Cad Bane a backstory really cheapened the allure of the character, which was his mystique and not knowing so much about him other than his personal code. Asajj Ventress, on the other hand, I've talked at length about how much I hate that they brought her back to life after the perfect conclusion to her arc in the Dark Disciple novel. And I was hoping that Tales of the Underworld would justify that huge decision, and it really didn't. It had the opportunity to, but it instead focused on these meaningless side quests that felt like one-off Clone Wars episodes and were framed as these big character revelations or character-defining moments for Asajj Ventress and her relationship to this new Padawan. Ultimately, I found Tales of the Underworld to be completely forgettable. I didn't walk away from this series thinking that Cad Bane was any more interesting than I already thought he was before the series. His extensive backstory did nothing for me, and I'm still not convinced that bringing Asajj Ventress back to life was a beneficial move for the character and her arc. The end of her episodes does leave the door open for further stories to be told with her and her Padawan, but we don't know when we will be seeing those. As much as I love Star Wars animation, it has a habit of leaving character journeys open-ended for long periods of time before fully resolving them, and that makes things feel very disjointed and confusing to follow. It happened with Ahsoka, it happened with Darth Maul, and now it's happening with Ventress, it seems. Maybe she'll make an appearance in Maul Shadow Lord, and that's what they're setting up, but I'm not holding out too much hope for that. Visions Volume 3, while it wasn't a bad season, it was my least favorite volume of the series so far. A large majority of the episodes didn't hit for me, whether it was a predictable story that didn't have any new or exciting ideas, or they were disappointing sequels to episodes we saw in Volume 1. Child of Hope, for example, the sequel to The Ninth Jedi, had very inconsistent animation quality across this short, and has me a bit worried for the Ninth Jedi spin-off series that's set to release in 2026. There were two bright spots from this season. The Lost Ones, the sequel to The Village Bride, which is one of my favorite Star Wars stories ever, was a worthy successor that captured those core Star Wars themes once again through this emotional battle with F and her former master who she thought had died years ago. Couple that with the beautiful animation and fantastic score, I need to see more stories with this character F, and I need this studio, Kinema Citrus, to continue making Star Wars stories because I think they absolutely understand what makes Star Wars special, and they're able to convey that with their own original stories. Dark was an ambiguous tour de France of different animation styles from a legendary Japanese animator that told an ambiguous story of a stormtrooper being at war with himself in his final moments as the Death Star explodes. With no dialogue, provocative imagery, and an interesting choice of music, this short demands your attention, and I think every single person who watches it could have a different interpretation about what it's trying to say. And I think that's beautiful. I think we need more Star Wars stories like that. And I truly think this is one of the most insane things that you will ever see in Star Wars if you haven't seen it already. Moving on to the final animated project released in 2025, the second season of LEGO Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy, Pieces of the Past. I had a good time with this season. It was another fun adventure that incorporated that classic LEGO charm and humor into its story. It poked fun at Star Wars, it didn't take itself too seriously, and it was able to play around in the sandbox. We had alternate versions of characters we know and love, like Padme being a pirate warlord, a light side Darth Vader, a dark side Obi-Wan, and the entire Skywalker family on screen at the same time for the first time ever. I have a full review on my channel if you want to go check it out, but long story short, this is a really enjoyable show for both families and longtime Star Wars fans. Alright, now I want to move on to the movie announcements that we got this year and dive a bit deeper into my thoughts on The Mandalorian Grogu and Star Wars Starfighter. The big surprise this year at Star Wars Celebration in Japan was not one, but two Star Wars movie announcements. with release dates, and they were two movies that had not previously been announced. And I think that is very telling about the state of the Rey movie and the James Mangold movie, because both of those movies were announced at the previous Star Wars Celebration, and now two movies that didn't even exist at the time are coming out before them. Many Star Wars fans, myself included, were very confused when Disney made the announcement several years ago that the return to movie theaters for Star Wars was going to be a Rey standalone movie. It didn't make sense. The sequel trilogy was a failure. The Rise of Skywalker was a disastrous finale to that trilogy. Why would you put the main character and the face of that trilogy at the forefront of the next movie you're going to put in theaters? I think aside from having trouble getting an actual script written for this movie, the list of writers that have come in and out of Lucasfilm to write this Rey movie is astonishing. But I think the real conclusion that Disney and its shareholders came to was that, hey, I don't think Rey is going to be a profitable main character in the next movie. So they shifted and said, what is the biggest thing we've done with the Star Wars IP? And that is easily The Mandalorian. It's the only thing that Disney has done that has had a tangible cultural impact. More specifically, Grogu himself is that cultural impact. I think it's pretty clear that the decision to make the Mandalorian and Grogu movie was driven by financial reasons and not creative ones. From the atrocious title that looks like it was pulled together by a focus group and not Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau, to the underwhelming trailer that was released later in the year that pretty much everyone agreed looked like they took Season 4 of The Mandalorian and cut it down to a theatrical runtime and are just releasing that footage as a movie. Some people defended the trailer saying we're overreacting, it's only the first look. But the bigger issue is that this is the first trailer for the next Star Wars movie that's going to be in theaters after a 7-year hiatus. This is supposed to be Star Wars' big reintroduction to theaters, and Disney's biggest chance to recapture the audience that it has slowly lost over the years. This trailer needed to be amazing. It needed to be what everyone was talking about, and it simply wasn't. It came and went. As of recording this, the trailer only has 10 million views over the past 3 months on the official Star Wars YouTube page. That is not cultural impact. I am rooting for this movie. I want it to do well, but right now, I do not have high expectations for it. I'm going to save my more detailed thoughts for my 2026 preview episode where I'll be discussing all the projects that are coming out next year with Star Wars. But moving on, I want to talk about the more exciting movie announcement from this year, which was Sean Levy's Star Wars Starfighter, starring Ryan Gosling. I, again, cannot believe that Ryan Gosling is going to be in the Star Wars galaxy. He is my favorite actor, and I think he has that perfect amount of Harrison Ford charm and general acting ability to really bring something great to this galaxy. He's surrounded by a great cast of character actors with Mia Goth, Matt Smith, and Amy Adams, and it's all being led by Sean Levy, a filmmaker that has proven that he can tell humorous, heartfelt stories across genres. But the biggest reason I'm excited for this movie is the fact that it's not connected to anything else in the Star Wars galaxy. It's new characters, it's a brand new story, in a brand new timeline, 5 years after The Rise of Skywalker, and it's supposed to be completely standalone. Ryan Gosling hasn't done any sequels before. I don't think he would sign on to this if there was going to be a sequel. So that has me excited because it feels like there is a huge opportunity for originality here. My main concerns with this movie are Sean Levy and his humor, sometimes feeling a bit James Gunn-esque, where he can't let an emotional moment breathe without inserting some cringy humor. I hope that he dials it back. Of course, Star Wars should be humorous, it should be lighthearted, but I never want it to take away from those quiet, emotional moments that also make Star Wars so incredible. Starfighter is slated for 2027, it has wrapped filming, and I'm hoping for a trailer very soon. Aside from the movie announcements this year, we also got 2 animated TV shows announced with Maul Shadow Lord and the 9th Jedi spin-off series, which will be the first full-length anime Star Wars show, which is super exciting. Maul Shadow Lord was a big surprise for me when it was announced this year. I had very mixed feelings on this announcement when it first came out. On one hand, I'm excited to see a Star Wars animated project fully commit to a darker tone throughout the entire show. I can't see Maul Shadowlord having fun one-off adventure episodes like The Bad Batch or Clone Wars. The Bad Batch specifically, I think, was very weighed down by those types of episodes because its overall tone was much darker. On the other hand, I don't know if Maul can lead a show. I think he's an incredible antagonist. I think he's a phenomenal supporting character, but I don't know if he's strong enough to be the main character of a story. I think the success of this show will very much depend on the supporting cast of characters around him. I know it's been teased that there is a Twi'lek apprentice that he might have, and Sam Witwer has stressed that we will be seeing a brand new side of Maul in this show, a more human side. I think we did get a lot of human stuff from him in the past, but maybe this will help round him out as a character. But right now, before I see a trailer, I don't know how I feel about this show. I'm excited for it. I want it to do good. I think it could be really interesting, but I just have a lot of questions. The other animated project that was announced was the Ninth Jedi spin-off series, which will continue the story of the Ninth Jedi, which was a short from Visions Volume 1. Probably the most popular short of all of them. Now, my excitement level for this series has shifted since the release of Visions Volume 3, where we got a sequel to The Ninth Jedi. Before Volume 3, I was so hyped for this. I was like, finally, we're getting a full-length anime in Star Wars, right when anime is at its peak popularity. We're getting a completely original story in a non-canon version of the Star Wars galaxy with brand new characters and really interesting world building. But then the sequel to Ninth Jedi came out in Volume 3, and the animation quality took a significant dip. There was so much CGI used in this. It looked awful in some moments. It felt like it was rushed out, and the team at the studio didn't have enough time to really polish the short. And I'm just scared that that might happen with the series later in the year if Disney didn't give them enough time or budget to make it as good as it can be. This is all obviously just speculation. We haven't seen a trailer for the Ninth Jedi series yet. It could be amazing. My expectations have just been tempered since the release of Volume 3, and I'm just praying that Disney doesn't ruin the first Star Wars anime full-length series when anime is the most popular it's ever been, and they have a huge opportunity to capture a global audience for Star Wars again. That completes all of the big announcements for TV and movies from 2025. I want to move on to video games, and I honestly don't want to spend too much time on this because I just released an episode discussing these video game announcements in detail if you want to go check that out, but Zero Company is coming out next year from Bit Reactor. This is an acclaimed studio. When it comes to turn-based strategy games, I've never played them before, but I'm excited to try out a new genre in the Star Wars galaxy, and I'm glad that the leader in this genre is making the game. The story sounds really interesting. It's taking place during the Clone Wars with these covert operations of a band of misfits like a Jedi Padawan, an ex-clone trooper, an Umbaran, a Mandalorian. All of that sounds really cool, and it seems like player choice is a huge pillar of this game's development. Your decisions change the story. If you lose a character, you lose them forever, so everything has weight and stakes to it. So I'm hoping this game doesn't get delayed. We haven't seen any trailers since its announcement. We haven't seen real gameplay yet, but I'm hoping it does come out at the end of 2026. A couple weeks ago, the Game Awards had two huge Star Wars video game announcements with Galactic Racer and Fate of the Old Republic. It's a big reason I waited to record this episode until after the Game Awards. Galactic Racer will be the first Star Wars racing game in a very, very long time. It's being developed by a racing game veteran team of developers at Fuse. It's going to have single player and multiplayer. The single player is actually supposed to be run-based, which makes me think roguelite, which is really exciting because that's one of my favorite new genres of game. I think it'll add a lot of variety and replayability, so I'm excited for this game, even though I'm not a big racing game fan. Fate of the Old Republic was definitely the bigger announcement. It was the one they used to open the show. It sees the return of the Old Republic. They have the game director from Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect leading the charge on this game. The trailer is super mysterious, it's ominous, the music was great, and people were really, really excited. But we did find out that the studio that's making this game only opened in July of 2025, so the typical development cycle for big AAA games is usually 2 to 3 years, so I wouldn't expect this game till 2028, probably 2029, which is very discouraging because they've done this before. They released a cinematic trailer for a Star Wars game when there isn't really a game yet. I am a bit more optimistic for this one, but as of right now, there's no real point to get excited for this one yet. Now, I want to quickly touch on the more negative news around Star Wars projects from this year, specifically around the Rey movie, the James Mangold Dawn of the Jedi movie, and the cancellation of The Hunt for Ben Solo. The Rey movie, Daisy Ridley, good for her. She is still going out on talk shows and saying, this movie's still happening. I'm really excited about it. But I do not think this movie is happening. They've had so many amazing script writers come in. They had David Lindelof. They had Stephen Knight, who works on Peaky Blinders. They all came in. They all turned in scripts, and they were all turned away. Now, you could take Disney's side and say that the scripts were bad and they made the right decision, but I have no reason to trust Disney's eye for scripts at this point. So my guess is that these scripts weren't safe enough, and they took too many risks. But yeah, I don't even know who the main writer is on the Rey movie at this point. The James Mangold Dawn of the Jedi movie was something that I was so excited for. I think going back in time that far is great. It gives you so much freedom in storytelling. James even said that in an interview. He doesn't want to be tied to all the canon, and I agree with him. I think if you're tied down by the canon, your creativity is so limited. But I really don't know how much he's really done for this movie so far. Last year, he was fully involved with the Bob Dylan movie and the award season that follows. He signed a huge exclusivity deal this year, I think, with Paramount to make movies for them. So I don't know if that affects his work on the Dawn of the Jedi movie, but right now it just doesn't seem like Star Wars is a priority for him, and I don't really know how much day-to-day work he is doing on this project, which is really, really discouraging. Finally, the Hunt for Ben Solo cancellation news that came out this year took the internet by storm. Adam Driver revealed essentially there was a full script written by Steven Soderbergh, a highly respected writer-director in Hollywood. Adam Driver was super excited about the project, which is surprising because he did not seem to be that interested in jumping back into Star Wars, so that makes me think the script was actually pretty good. He said it was a very character-driven story, very akin to The Empire Strikes Back, and that Kathleen Kennedy and Dave Filoni were fully backing it. They really loved the direction, but Bob Iger and the higher-ups at Disney said no. I'm still on the fence about this. I think if this movie was announced after The Rise of Skywalker, I would have rolled my eyes, especially bringing Ben Solo back to life after he just sacrificed himself. But hearing the passion that Adam Driver had for this project and the fact that Steven Soderbergh was attached does make me think that we potentially missed a good movie. But it wasn't meant to be, so we will add it to the graveyard of unmade Star Wars project. I always like to briefly discuss books in these end-of-year episodes, and we had 3 big releases this year. The High Republic book series came to an end with Trials of the Jedi. This is a series I had followed for several years, and while I enjoyed the final book, it does feel a bit safe as an ending, and I think Phase 3 as a whole came together very conveniently. So while it didn't reach the highs of Phase 1 again, I did enjoy the way it wrapped up the story in Phase 3. Reign of the Empire, Mask of Fear was the first book in a new trilogy that is exploring the architects of the rebellion during the early days of the Empire, specifically Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and Saw Gerrera. It very much had the Andor vibe of the politics and backdoor dealings we saw in that show, and also the guerrilla tactics of rebellions before they're fully organized. This was definitely my favorite read of the year in Star Wars. It's about 500 pages, and it's very dense with detail, so I can understand that it's not everyone's cup of tea. But if you liked Andor, I think you would very much enjoy this book, and I'm looking forward to the next 2 books in this trilogy. And finally, my biggest book disappointment of the year was Master of Evil, a story that promised to explore Darth Vader's journey to find the secrets of the dark side, to bring Padme back to life, to discover the power that Palpatine never taught him. The title was menacing, the cover was horrifying, the synopsis sounded so intriguing, and yet the book is none of those things. Vader is not the main character of this story. It's actually an Imperial Guard and his droid companion. We maybe get 2 or 3 truly POV chapters for Vader. The tone of the story is generally optimistic, which is the exact opposite of what you get from the cover, synopsis, and title. There are weird subplots in here surrounding the Techno Union and bringing the droid army back. And for being called the Master of Evil, Darth Vader is incredibly empathetic and forgiving in this novel. So while I don't think this book is bad, I think it's incredibly misleading, and that's irritating to me. Ended on a tough note there, but that wraps up my 2025 year in review for Star Wars. This was a solid year that came with some of the highest highs we've seen in Star Wars ever with Andor Season 2. And while I was disappointed by some of the animated releases this year, I do think there were some great things to take away from animation, like the shorts Dark and The Lost Ones from Visions Volume 3, and Pieces of the Past. LEGO Star Wars continues to stay winning. We celebrated 20 years of Revenge of the Sith. I am so sad that I missed the re-release, but I'm so happy that so many of you were able to go see it again in theaters the way it was meant to be seen. And I think we have a lot to look forward to for the future of Star Wars. I am always cautiously optimistic, but I do think there is a change in strategy in the way that they are announcing projects. We obviously have to wait and see if they actually release, or if they actually release in a good state and are good Star Wars projects. Again, Disney's track record on that has not been great, so we will see. But 2026 is looking like a pretty cool year for Star Wars, with a movie in theaters, some animated projects, and potentially 2 video games. I will be doing an episode talking about all of the 2026 releases we should expect, so I'm excited for that. Please let me know what your favorite thing was from Star Wars this year in 2025. It's been a really fun first year on YouTube. I, of course, have had the podcast for almost 5 years now, but I think the transition to YouTube was a good evolution for the channel and its growth. It's been a lot of extra work, but it's also been so rewarding. I appreciate all the interactions I have with all of you, your words of encouragement, your comments, your likes, your views. It all means the world to me. Let's keep it going. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and may the Force be with you. Peace.